As I've gotten older, just my good-hearted spirit has gotten so jaded, I would stop and help anybody. People who didn't need help, I was trying to help them. And through I moved out here 16 years ago, and in the years, 7, 8, 9 years into living here in the city, the hustle and bustle and traffic, you get jaded, you see terrible things all the time, and you can't stop always and help. A few years ago, I'm not exactly sure how many years, I woke up, and there's the term wrong side of the bed. I was clinically on the wrong side of the bed. It was right, I would probably guess my midlife crisis began maybe that morning, I'm not sure. And I didn't want to do anything that morning. It was Sabbath morning. I didn't want to go to church. I wanted to stay in bed. Forced myself to grow a little bit, and I got dressed. I went to church. Sat down, Randy was speaking, and the gist of his sermon that morning was there are people who know what's right in this world, who know what's right by the laws of man and by the laws of God, and there are people who do what's right. There's a difference between knowing and doing. And out of his whole 30-minute sermon or so, the one part he kept repeating that really stuck in my head is there are people who know and there are people who do. And abbreviated version of what stuck in my head was, there are people who do, there are people who do, and just kept repeating. I didn't feel any better after church. I live close to Mount Rubidoux in Riverside. It's about a 3-mile hike up about 600 feet, and I was like, I'm gonna go hit that. So I drove over, hit it, and I'm a photographer by trade, commercial photographer, and I notice everything. I'm the kind of person who sits at the airport and stares at people, and it's not that it probably comes across as creepy, but I'm just interested in the details of life and how people look. And I noticed somebody coming down the hill. I mean, there's hundreds of people that hike Mount Rubidoux every day. I noticed one particular guy who didn't fit the mold of the usual hiker. He was kind of 80s heavy metal reject or leftover. Kind of the big hair, balding a little bit, leather jacket, cruising down. He just didn't look like the typical hiker that I see up here. And I just noted him in my head, wasn't anything other than that. I was like, that's interesting. And I kept on hiking, still in a dark, grumpy mood. I get to the top of the mountain. My attitude hasn't changed. So I'm just like, I'm gonna go home, take a nap, then I'll probably work. As soon as the sun goes down, I'll probably start editing photos or something. So I hoofed it back down the mountain. I saw the same guy that I noticed, and as I got closer to him, he looks right at me and he's like, hey man, you seen any keys on the mountain? I lost my keys. I really gotta find my keys. And I was like, no, didn't see any keys. He's like, all right, man, cool. So I keep on going home. And the voice in my head was like, you should go help him find his keys. If anybody can find them, you can find them. It was getting dark, and I was like, this is ridiculous. It's a big hill. It could be anywhere. People crawl all over the rocks. They walk off trail. They could be anywhere. But I went home, and the whole time in my head, there are people who do. You know what's right, Chet. Go out there and do it. Go help him find his keys. I don't want to do it. I lay down, and I gotta go. So I grabbed my headlamp, grabbed my flashlight, put on warmer clothing, and really just arguing with myself, driving back on how foolish it is to go look for keys on basically like a 4 square mile area. So I come back to the mountain. The only car in the parking lot, or the only thing in the parking lot, is his motorcycle. So I'm like, well, he hasn't found him yet, so here we go. So I hoofed it up the hill, checking nooks and crannies. Think it'd be easier to find him at night because they might pick up some light with the headlamp or my flashlight. Got up to the far north end of the mountain, and the darkest of dark, not dark thoughts, but just negative thoughts. It was like, just go home. You're not gonna find it. You're an idiot to even try. And so I sat down on a bench, and I'm just kind of reevaluating my life when this is the big thing that I'm arguing about, is whether or not to find someone's keys, feeling kind of foolish about that to begin with. I may have even audibly yelled at God, this is stupid. Why do I feel compelled to look for this man's keys? So I get up, and I might have even swore I kicked the ground, and I kicked the keys. The keys were covered by this gravelly dirt completely. They were completely underneath the ground. I kicked them out from under the ground, and there they were. And a dark veil lifted, my whole day instantly changed. And I was just giddy. because I was like, it's so absurd. And more backstory on myself, one of the most ridiculous things about me is that when I hear people that pray for their keys or their lost wallet or whatever, I always kind of roll my eyes like, I lost my keys, I was going to be late for work, and I prayed and I opened up my eyes and there they were, whatever. That I've always been the kind of person that kind of rolls like, oh sure, I'm sure God's real concerned about you being late for work, like maybe get up earlier, So I found it odd that God used the lost keys, but that's only half the story. So I find the keys, I'm like, woo, yeah. So I grab the keys, I start hoofing it down the trail to go look for the guy. I think I was actually skipping, I was so giddy. And I see the guy, and he is like, moping, head down, shuffling, clearly dejected. And he doesn't recognize me because, there were other people on the hill he was asking about. He's like, hey man, you seen any keys up there? I really got to find my keys. And I was like, you mean these? And I put them out in front of his head. He, and his eyes just like lit up, and it's pretty dark. I could see my headlamp blasting him. And he started to like well up with tears. I'm like, wow, he really needed his keys. We ended up talking for 45 minutes or an hour. His story is he had a drug-related arrest in the last year or two, had lost custody of his children to his girlfriend, had lost his job, had just recently lost his apartment. And the key that he was looking for, one of the reasons it was such a big deal is the key, I think, had a $200 deposit on it. So not only was he being kicked out of the place, if he didn't find the key, he was going to have to, shell out $200 extra, which he didn't have because he didn't have a job. And he looked me dead in the eyes. He's like, I was literally on my way to go home and kill myself. And I know people throw that around sometimes, like, oh, I could kill myself. Like, that's unfortunately a thing people say. But I've actually that same year, I talked 3 people down, literally, like, talked them down from killing themselves. And I know the look, and it's the most frightening thing to see. And to see that in his eyes, like, I knew what that whole day had been for. Like, if I at any point, I'm not saying that he would have gone home and killed himself if I hadn't found the keys, but maybe he would have, maybe he wouldn't have. That's not up to me. God knows that, only he knows that. But at any point in that day, if I had just kind of given up and be like, you know what, phooey on this day, like I'm just going to stay in bed and, hope that tomorrow's better. To find keys by kicking them that are in the dirt, I mean, that's a miracle in itself, which is hilarious miracle based on my kind of disrespecting lost key stories. But then to have it potentially save the man's life. So I think since then, how that's kind of affected me is, for one, I try to listen to that more often. And for my skeptical brain, I'm a fairly skeptical and analytical and critical person by nature, that I can look through that whole day. If I had not gone to church, if Randy had not preached that sermon, if I hadn't have been if I had been looking at my phone during that, there are people who do, segment, if I had left church later, if I had not gone, like there's so many 30 seconds could have changed that whole story. So it's just, it's undeniable that was a God moment, a God interaction for myself and for the man, that it's been like the greatest thing that I look to when I'm, when I see terrible things in the news or I'm reading about the Holocaust or whatever. How can there be a God if there's all these things going on? And I think about finding something that's like, less than 5 square inches on a 3 or 4 square mile hill. None of that day was an accident. And so I feel like I need to tell people about that and probably need to focus more on it in my own day to day. I think that would help just my general mindset on things.